Good day and thank you for joining us on BTV Global News at 12. I am Lee Bratesman Johanna. Now the news in details. Global investors are confronting a renewed wave of geopolitical uncertainty following the reported capture of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro by the United States, a dramatic move that has sent shockwaves through financial markets and foreign policy circles. The report.
The operation, attributed to the administration of U.S. President Donald Trump, represents one of the most aggressive interventions in Latin America in recent decades. While details surrounding the capture remain limited, the developments have immediately raised questions about Venezuela's political future, regional stability, and the fate of the country's vast oil reserves, the largest proven reserves in the world. From a market perspective, the event has introduced a complex mix of risk and opportunity. On the one hand, investors are wary of potential retaliation from Maduro loyalists, unrest within Venezuela, and broader diplomatic fallout involving U.S. adversaries such as Russia, China, and Iran, all which have strategic interests in the country. These concerns have driven short-term volatility in global equity, emerging market assets, and energy markets. On the other hand, some investors are positioning for a long-term upside scenario. A regime change in Caracas could lead to the lifting of U.S. and international sanctions, opening Venezuela's oil sector to foreign investment for the first time in years. Such a shift could significantly increase global oil supply, ease energy prices, and benefit riskier assets tied to emerging markets and energy infrastructure. Oil markets react swiftly to the news, with prices initially spiking on fears of disruption before stabilizing amid speculation that Venezuelan production could eventually return to global markets at scale. Analysts caution, however, that restoring output would take time due to years of underinvestment, damaged infrastructure, and the need for political legitimacy under any successor government. Currency and bond markets have also responded. Venezuelan sovereign bonds, long considered distressed assets, saw renewed speculative interest, while broader emerging market currency experienced mild pressure as investors reassessed geopolitical exposure. Beyond markets, the move has intensified debate over U.S. foreign policy. Critics warn that the capture of a sitting head of state could set a dangerous precedent and provoke asymmetric responses, including cyber activities or proxy actions elsewhere. Supporters argue that removing Maduro could end years of economic collapse, humanitarian crisis, and mass migration affecting the wider region. For now, investors are bracing for continued uncertainty. Risk appetite remains fragile, with market participation closely monitoring diplomatic reactions, statements from Washington, and signs of stability or unrest inside Venezuela. While the prospect of unlocking Venezuela's oil wealth offers potential long-term gains, the immediate outlook is defined by heightened geopolitical risk and an increasingly unpredictable global landscape. Favor Kolawole, reporting for Beetv News.
Teenagers, including victims as young as 14 and 15-year-old, were among the 40 people who died in a devastating New Year's Eve fire at the Lake Conservation Bar in the Sky Resort town of Crans, Montana, Sweet authorities said Sunday, as the painstaking process of identifying the dead bodies continues. The report.
Swiss police in the cantons of Balears confirmed that 16 more bodies have been identified, raising the total number of recovered remains to 24, with the youngest identified victim, a 14-year-old Swiss girl, and two 15-year-old Swiss girls also among the dead. Officials said 10 others were teenagers aged 16 to 18, alongside adults including Swiss men aged 20 and 31 and a 39-year-old French national. The tragedy struck at around 1:30 a.m. on January 1st as hundreds of people celebrated the New Year inside the popular bar. Initial investigations suggest that sparkler-style candles attached to champagne bottles may have ignited highly flammable materials on the ceiling, causing a rapid and intense fire that engulfed the venue. Authorities have described the identification of victims as difficult due to the severity of burns. DNA and dental records are being used to confirm identities before remains can be released to families. Officials said 119 others were injured, many with severe burns, and several have been transferred to burn units across Europe. Family members and community members have gathered in mourning at services and memorials. Grief and shock were palpable as relatives awaited news of missing loved ones. A silent procession and interconfessional church service have taken place in Crans, Montana, with hundreds paying tribute to the dead and injured. Swiss prosecutors have opened a criminal investigation into the managers of Lee Constellation on suspicion of offense including negligent homicide and negligent bodily harm, as authorities examine whether fire safety standards including age verification, emergency exits, fire extinguishers, and materials used in the bar were properly observed. The disaster, one of the deadliest in recent Swiss history, has provoked international condolences and raised questions about safety protocols at crowded entertainment venues, especially during high-risk celebrations. Favor Kolawole reporting for Beetv News.
Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro was being held in a New York detention center on Sunday awaiting drug trafficking charges after an audacious U.S. military operation that toppled his government and led to his capture, U.S. and Venezuelan officials said. The report.
The United States launched a coordinated strike early Saturday, deploying special forces and aircrafts into Venezuela's capital Caracas in a mission that stunned the region and marked the most direct U.S. intervention in Latin America since the 1989 invasion of Panama. Maduro and his wife Celia Flores were seized during the operation, flown first to a U.S. Navy vessels and then brought to New York, where they are being held in a federal detention facility and will face federal drug and narco-terrorism charges. U.S. President Donald Trump said the United States would oversee Venezuela until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition, and asserts that major U.S. oil companies would help restore Venezuela's decrepit oil industry. Trump also made clear he was not afraid to deploy U.S. forces, although Secretary of State Marco Rubio later walked back the implications that U.S. troops would govern the country. In Caracas, top Maduro loyalists denounced the operation as a kidnapping and vowed resistance. Interim Minister Diosdado Cabello said the unity of the revolutionary force is guaranteed and reaffirmed Maduro as Venezuela's legitimate president. With Maduro absent, Vice President Delcy Rodriguez, sworn in as interim president by the Venezuelan Supreme Court and backed by the armed forces. Rodriguez, who has deep ties to the country's political and military elites, rejected U.S. claims of authority and called for national unity. The dramatic seizure has provoked deep international concern. At the United Nations, legal experts and several countries warned the operation could violate international law as the use of force against a sovereign nation without its consent or Security Council authorization sets a dangerous precedent, officials and analysts said. Populio also called for Venezuela's sovereignty to be respected and expressed concern over the unfolding crisis. Several Latin American governments have criticized the U.S. move, while others have been more cautious, balancing concerns about Maduro's authoritarian rule with worries about foreign military intervention. Global markets reacted to the geopolitical shock, with investors warning of heightened risks in the region. Analysts said the U.S. action could unlock Venezuela's vast oil reserves but also risk wider instability. The United States has indicated Maduro in the past on charges including drug trafficking and narco-terrorism, which the Venezuelan leader has consistently denied. Evelyn is Zibli reporting for Beetv News.
Sirens have started exchanging old banknotes for newly redesigned currency under a government plan aimed at strengthening the national currency and supporting economic revival after years of war and financial instability. The report.
The banknote swap, officially launched on January 1st, 2026, is part of a broader monetary reform introduced by the transitional government led by President Ahmed al-Shara. Citizens were seen at banks and designated exchange centers beginning January 3rd, handing in old bills and receiving the new series of notes. Under the reform, the Syrian pound, also known as the Syrian lira, has been predominated by removing two zeros, meaning 100 old pounds now equal one new pound. This change does not alter the real value of the currency but simplifies prices and cash handling in everyday transactions, where hyperinflation had previously forced people to carry large bundles of old banknotes even for small purchases. The new banknotes range from denominations of 5 to 500 pounds and carry new imagery of national symbols such as roses, wheat, olives, and oranges, replacing portraits of the former Assad family that appeared on the old currency. This design shift is intended to symbolize a break from Syria's past and the start of a new economic and national chapter. Authorities say the swap will be conducted over a 90-day transition period, during which both old and new banknotes will remain legal tender. Exchange points include public and private banks, microfinance institutions, and currency exchange outlets across the country. Citizens can exchange old bills at no cost, and the old currency will remain redeemable at central bank branches for several years after the transition. Central bank officials emphasize that the redenomination is not a devaluation of the currency but a step to modernize cash usage, ease daily transactions, and restore public confidence in the Syrian pound following more than a decade of war, sanctions, and severe inflations. Merchants are required to display prices in both old and new currency during the swap to protect consumers from confusion or price manipulation. While the measure addresses practical issues in monetary handling, some economics caution that without deeper structural reforms, removing zeros alone may have limited impacts on inflation or long-term economic stability. Nevertheless, the initiative marks a significant symbolic and practical milestone in Syria's efforts to rebuild its economy. Evelyn is Zibli reporting for Beetv News.
Pope Leo XIV on Sunday urged that Venezuela remain an independent and sovereign nation, expressing deep concern over the recent United States operation that led to the ouster and capture of President Nicolas Maduro. The report.
Speaking during the Angolos prayer at St. Peter's Square, the Pope said he was following events with a soul full of concern and called for respect for international law, human rights, and Venezuela's constitutional order. The good of the Venezuelan people must take precedence over all other considerations, Pope Leo said. He emphasized that efforts should focus on protecting human rights, ensuring justice, and fostering peace and stability, particularly for those suffering from the country's long-running economic crisis. Pope Leo comments came a day after a U.S.-led operation in Caracas captured Maduro and his wife, who were flown to the United States and are now facing drug-related charges in New York. The U.S. administration have indicated it will temporarily assume control of Venezuela's oil-rich resources, prompting widespread international criticism and concern over violation of sovereignty. In response to the crisis, Venezuela's Supreme Tribunal of Justice named Vice President Delcy Rodriguez as acting president. Meanwhile, several countries and international organizations have condemned the U.S. action as a breach of international law, while U.S. officials maintain it was necessary to combat narcotic trafficking and restore order. Pompeo urged the international community to support Venezuela's sovereignty and welfare of its people, calling for prayer and global attention to ensure justice, peace, and stability in the nation during this turbulent period. Favor Kolawole, reporting for Beetv News.
The British Ministry of Defence (MOD) has confirmed that the United Kingdom, in coordination with France, carried out a targeted military strike on an underground facility in Syria, believed to have been used by the Islamic State group to store weapons. According to the ministry, the operation, which took place north of the ancient city of Palmyra, posed no apparent risk to civilians. The report.
The Pamir region, known for its UNESCO World Heritage archaeological sites, have been a strategic location for IS in the past due to its proximity to desert terrain that allows for concealment, logistical, and weapons network. The MOD confirmed that the strike focused specifically on military targets linked to IS rather than civilian operations. An early assessment indicates that the facility was destroyed or severely damaged. The action comes amid continued global concerns about this resurgence of the extremist groups in Syria and neighboring Iraq. Analysts note that while IS no longer controls territory as it once did, it remains a threat due to its ability to recruit, finance operations, and exploit unstable regions. International partners, including NATO members and the coalition against IS, surveillance and occasional strikes to limit the group's operational capability. The Syrian conflict, now in its second decade, have created conditions that allow remnants of IS and other extremist groups to survive in remote areas. Palmyra itself was captured by IS in 2015 and again in 2016 before being retaken by Syrian forces, leaving a legacy of destruction that continues to complicate security efforts in the region. The UK Ministry of Defence stated that it will continue to monitor the situation closely in coordination with France and other coalition partners. The operation highlights the persistent challenges posed by IS even years after its territorial defeat and underscore the international community's commitment to preventing a resurgence of terrorism in Syria and beyond. Favor Kolawole reporting for Beetv.
Lastly, in business news, CIG Motors Co. Limited has terminated the appointment of its executive director, Jibri Arogundadi, over allegations of financial misappropriation.
In a statement issued on Sunday, the automobile firm disclosed that the findings of the internal review revealed actions that fell below its governance, compliance, and ethical standards. Based on the gravity of the issues uncovered, management approved the immediate termination of Arugude's appointment. CIG Motors also confirmed that aspects of the investigation involving alleged financial impropriety and being referred to the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission for further investigation. The company stated that it is cooperating fully with law enforcement authorities, reiterating its zero-tolerance stance on financial misconduct and its commitment to protecting institutional integrity and stakeholders' interests. How 712 billion naira upgrades others-shape aviation in 2025. Nigeria's aviation industry recorded mixed fortunes in 2025, with notable gains overshadowed by persistent challenges that drew widespread criticism from stakeholders. The sector grappled with rising airfares, weak infrastructure, regulatory bottlenecks, limited access to affordable financing, and disputes arising from concession arrangements. Airline operators, particularly domestic carriers, attributed the surge in airfares to these constraints, warning that air travel was increasingly becoming unaffordable for the average Nigerian. Throughout the year, the industry frequently made headlines for negative developments, including institutional inefficiencies and structural weaknesses. The sector was also marked by repeated incidents of airport disruptions linked to violence and passenger misconduct. High-profile cases involve Fuji musician Wasiu Ayinde, popularly known as Kwamwan, A confrontation involving Edo North Senatorial District Senator Adams Oshomole and a widely reported altercation between a passenger, Comfort Emerson, and an Ibom Air cabin crew member, which escalated into a major airport incident. The National Emergency Management Agency has urged communities prone to flooding to adopt improved environmental practices and disaster risk reduction measures as part of a new national response strategy. The agency said prevention and preparedness must guide responses to recurring climate-related disaster. The NEMA Director General Zubaida Umar gave the charge while distributing relief materials to flood victims in Ogoja and Yala local government areas of Cross River State. Represented by the Head of Relief and Rehabilitation at the Uyo Operations Office, Victor Akpankpam, she emphasized the importance of responsible waste disposal, drainage maintenance, and early warning systems in reducing flood-related losses. Umar sympathized with affected residents, explaining that the intervention was aimed at cushioning the impacts of floods recorded earlier in the year and supporting recovering efforts. Beneficiaries were seen leaving distribution centers with food items and other relief materials, expressing relief as assistance reached households affected by displacements and disrupted livelihoods. Temitope Oluwafemi reporting for BTV News.